This is the BBC. For details of our complete range of programmes, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
Welcome to the latest global news compiled in the early hours of Wednesday, the 19th of October. I'm Jackie Leonard with a selection of highlights from across BBC World Service News today. Coming up.
As the net closes on so-called Islamic State, the risks are increasing for those trapped down below in Mosul.
Aid agencies say they're concerned about the hundreds of thousands of civilians caught in the fight for Iraq's second largest city. Also in the podcast, President Obama criticises the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump for his repeated claims that the election is being rigged against him.
I have never seen in my lifetime any presidential candidate trying to discredit the elections before votes have even taken place.
A spokesman for South Sudan's president says the rebel leader Riek Machar will no longer have a role to play in the country's politics. And researchers in Australia discover that milk from Tasmanian Devils could be used to treat antibiotic-resistant superbugs. Tuesday was the second day of the military push in Iraq to oust the Islamic State group from Mosul. The Iraqi army and its allies say they're closing in on the city with support from US airstrikes. Relief agencies are warning of a looming crisis, with hundreds of thousands of people expected to flee the city in the coming weeks. The International Committee of the Red Cross has appealed to all sides to show humanity towards the civilians still thought to be in Mosul. The Iraqi Foreign Minister Ibrahim al-Jafari is confident that will happen. His words are spoken by a translator.
Iraqi military forces are worth the praise. They are working hard and they are making sure that the least possible losses and damages are incurred. We've done that in Fallujah, and we are doing this also for Mosul because we know that our opponents are trying to use the innocent civilians as human shields.
The Iraqi forces and Kurdish fighters are trying to surround Mosul before the final push. We got the latest on the fighting from our correspondent Richard Galpin, who's watching developments from Erbil, the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan.
The Iraqi army is pushing up the road to the south of Mosul towards the city. There are reports that they've taken 10 villages under their control, but again, they are still a long way from the outskirts of Mosul, and apparently there are still another 70 villages on the route to those outskirts. So it's still some distance. We think the closest any military forces are to Mosul is about something like 12 kilometres. So there's still some way to go, but clearly they are making progress.
Now, we've had some reports that the IS leader, al-Baghdadi, is in Mosul. Presumably this means that IS will be putting up a very stiff resistance and trying to hold as much of the city as it can.
Yes, obviously it's impossible to confirm these reports, but these are coming apparently from a senior Kurdish official who's saying that he's seen intelligence reports saying that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is in Mosul. I think it's likely then that that would mean there will be a stand taken by the several thousand ISIS fighters who are believed to be in Mosul. The numbers vary enormously, but it's thought to be at least 3,000, possibly 5,000. We don't know for sure. So it would be a very tough fight. Having said that, of course, it was thought that the campaign in Fallujah not so long ago would be very, very tough and would go on for a long time. But actually, in the end, it was over comparatively quickly.
And just to be clear, is Mosul completely surrounded?
No, I don't think it is. There's still, obviously, the Iraqi army and the Peshmerga, the Kurdish fighters, and various militia around sort of have different fronts from which they're moving in on the city, but that circle is still quite wide. They're obviously now trying to make that circle tighter, but we understand that there certainly is one major route out of the city, and that would obviously be a route for civilians to be able to get out once the fighting starts getting intense. And in fact, actually already there are some reports that about 100 families trying to move out of the southeastern districts of the city because they feel the fighting is approaching there.
Richard Galpin in Erbil. And as he mentioned, some civilians are managing to get out of Mosul, but most of them still remain in the city. Let's hear now from our correspondent Orla Girin, who's been out with Kurdish troops in northern Iraq in the mountains overlooking Mosul.
As the net closes on so-called Islamic State, The risks are increasing for those trapped down below in Mosul. There's the danger of coalition airstrikes. IS could try to use the local population as human shields, and if and when Iraqi forces make it inside the city, they could be caught in the crossfire. The extremist latest propaganda video from inside Mosul paints a picture of normality. The message is, all's well. Anyone daring to say otherwise could be beheaded. Thank God everything is fine, says this man. It's peaceful here. The TV channels are lying, 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 lying. A year ago, they were driven from this area by airstrikes and troops from Iraq's autonomous Kurdish region, the Peshmerga. They took us to see what IS may have in store when the battle comes to Mosul. A homemade chemical weapon, chlorine gas attached to an improvised mortar. Crude but potentially lethal. The fuses have already been removed. How many of these did you find?
24.
Just in this village?
Just in this village.
The extremists had the basics for survival hidden from view. The authorities here hope they will run out of hiding places in the coming weeks and months.
Ola Guerin reporting from the front line in northern Iraq. Russia has halted airstrikes on rebel-held neighbourhoods of the Syrian city of Aleppo, 48 hours ahead of a planned pause on Thursday. The Defence Ministry said it wanted to allow civilians and fighters to make preparations to flee the city, but the indications are that many are unwilling to leave. Our diplomatic correspondent James Robbins reports from Moscow.
The Kremlin spokesman says airstrikes on Aleppo have been halted partly as an act of goodwill and partly to allow space to prepare for what it calls a humanitarian pause on Thursday. Moscow wants the civilians of Aleppo to use those 8 hours to flee the city along 6 corridors, whilst, according to the Russians, rebels would also be given safe passage to the neighbouring province of Idlib. A former Russian general, Yevgeny Brzezinski, told me this would answer international criticism.
Russia is constantly accused of barbarous bombings, that it's bombing civilian infrastructure. So it's not the first time the Russian MOD just proposes that all civilian population leaves east of Aleppo.
The UN has made clear civilians cannot be forced to leave their homes. International law forbids it, and UN officials say they lack the necessary time and security assurances to be able to deliver humanitarian aid. Russia insists that Thursday's pause also offers an opportunity for rebels supported by the United States and her allies to separate themselves from outlawed jihadists associated with al-Qaeda. Moscow says America has failed to meet its commitment to achieve that. But behind all this, past experience suggests the temporary pause may change very little. Most of eastern Aleppo's remaining 250,000 civilians seem reluctant to leave their city. Many apparently fear it would amount to surrender to President Assad's forces. Russia has given no guarantee that bombing will not resume after the pause is over.
James Robbins. The Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has been sharply attacked by President Obama for modelling his policies on the Russian President Vladimir Putin and showering him with praise. The president's broadside came a day after Mr. Trump told a radio talk show host that he would consider visiting Russia before taking office if elected. Mr. Obama also rebuked Mr. Trump over his accusations that the election was being rigged against him, saying he should stop whining and start putting his case to the American people.
I have never seen in my lifetime or in modern political history any presidential candidate trying to discredit the elections and the election process before votes have even taken place. It's unprecedented. It happens to be based on no facts.
On Wednesday, the Republican Party nominee and Mrs. Clinton face off in the third and final presidential debate at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. Donald Trump has seen his poll numbers slide since their first battle of wits, followed by the emergence of a tape from 2005 in which he spoke of assaulting women and which he was forced to address in the second debate. Mr. Trump has denied any impropriety, but a number of women have come forward with sexual assault allegations against him. His wife, Melania Trump has described the accusations as lies and said he'd been egged on by the interviewer into what she described as boy talk when he made lewd remarks about women. According to one latest opinion poll, Mrs. Clinton will head into Wednesday's debate with a 7-point lead over her Republican rival. In our podcast on Monday, we reported on how the Kremlin-funded television channel RT said its bank accounts in Britain had been shut down. It accused the authorities of trying to restrict its broadcasting. On Tuesday, the British bank NatWest denied reports that it had closed or frozen the accounts of the controversial Russian television channel. Our correspondent Johnny Diamond has been following the story.
On the one hand, NatWest, which is the bank that did write to an arm of RT saying it wanted to close its bank accounts, has pointed out it didn't write to RT in the UK in general. It wrote to what it described as a supplier of RT, which appeared to contradict the line coming from Russia Today's management, which was that all its accounts had been shut down. From Moscow came the response. From Moscow, the Moscow office of RT came the response, that it had shut down the accounts of the local production company that serves RT in the United Kingdom, and that in particular processes the salaries of RT's staff. So a fairly critical part of the channel's infrastructure. What do we take away from this? Two things, I think. One is that with the sort of very swift descent into accusation and counter-accusation, certainly from the Russian embassy here in London, it's an indication of quite how tense relations are and how quick each side is prepared to sort of jump on an issue like this. And secondly is the importance of what, for want of a better phrase, is the information wars. The ability of countries to put forward their own narrative, put forward their own stories about what is going on, and to preserve the channels through which they do that. Russia is very keen that organisations like RT, whether it's on television or online, where it's very successful, are able to put forward a version of events which the Russian government approves of.
Johnny Diamond. If you really love your football, you buy a season ticket, a team jersey, and also get actively involved in virtual football via one of the many games. But the latest version of Football Manager is adding a political element, with online managers having to consider the transfer of virtual players in soft and hard versions of Brexit, depending on whether players are still able to move freely between Britain and Europe. The World Service sports editor Ben Sutherland explained how the game works.
Football Manager basically is a computer game simulation, in which case you can take charge of pretty much any football team in the global game. At this stage, it's been going on for many, many years, since back in the mid-90s. I think the first version came out, so we're now on Football Manager 2017.
And what is this new element that's been added and why?
This new element, they have built in that it will be ahead of time for either a soft Brexit or a hard Brexit. So for listeners around the world, basically what this involves is that at the moment, rules are that any player from any country in the European Union under EU rules is free to play for any of the teams in the UK. If the deal is a hard Brexit, and that means that there will have to be every player from Europe will have to get a work permit in order to play.
Just how political is this?
Ahead of the Brexit vote, there was indeed a lot of speculation around how the Premier League might cope with it. The Premier League clearly being this enormous global brand, drives up huge amounts of revenue, not least because of the attraction of so many global stars all playing in England.
They do say that you should keep politics out of sport. And presumably that means you should also keep politics out of virtual sport. Have the makers of Football Manager come under much criticism for this?
Not as yet specifically. I mean, they have been sort of explaining that what they want to do with this is make it future-proof, effectively. They're building in real-life events into the game. They do like to try and keep it as up-to-date as possible. And when you're playing one of these games, which I have myself, it is fun. It is part of the thing to try and make it as real-life as possible. And the makers clearly are onto that, and they know that people like it as up-to-date as possible, and they'll tweak the rules accordingly.
You play this. Are you good at it?
I have made Aston Villa win the Premier League, which is exactly how good I am at it, because they're dreadful in real life. So I'm pretty skilled.
Ben Sutherland. You're listening to Global News, the best stories, interviews and on-the-spot reporting from the BBC World Service. And a reminder that every weekend you can hear a review of the week's main news stories and why they matter. That's In the World this week. It's broadcast on Saturdays and Sundays, and it's available to download from our website. Now let's go back to one of our main stories, the campaign to recapture Iraq's second biggest city, Mosul, from the Islamic State group. About 85 kilometres east of Mosul is Erbil, the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan. So what do people there make of the latest offensive? Our correspondent Hugh Sykes has been talking to a few of them.
This is the Grand Bazaar in Erbil. Amazingly varied place. Here in one of the arcades, right next to each other, there's a stall selling women's lingerie, bras and night dresses, right next to a stall selling spare parts for gas cookers. And here there are sunglasses, and here there are hair dryers, and here there are vanity cases, and here there are shoes, and here there's cheese, and here there are nuts, and here there's Turkish delight and honey. And everybody I've spoken to here, Mosul, is on their minds.
I am very happy for this operation, very happy. We try to move the Daesh.
Try to get Daesh out.
Daesh out. Yes, they are very bad people.
Are you confident that the Peshmerga fighters will win?
Very, 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 very hard. You are very.
I trust them very, 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 very much.
Peshmerga عمو أنا بطل يعني.
They're all heroes. He's saying that the Peshmergas, they're all heroes fighting for us.
Nazim Mustafa and Molem Mohammed, textile merchants here in the bazaar, and gold merchant Rizgar Anwar Bakar. But back to that honey stall now to talk to Heyman.
Just honey, I would say.
Are you a honey farmer?
Yeah.
Are they your bees?
Yes.
Where are they?
It is in mountains, the highest mountains, named Halgur. Yes.
Mountain honey from Iraqi Kurdistan.
Yes.
The fighting has started in Mosul.
Yes. Peshmerga have to win, because I love it. We want a victory.
He's saying this with a big smile.
Yeah, I love victory. Like, I love Peshmerga.
Are Peshmerga strong enough? ISIS, Daesh are also strong.
Yes, true. My cousin is Peshmerga.
Is he fighting?
Yes, of course. Family Peshmerga.
Peshmerga family?
Yes.
Is he okay?
Yes, he's okay, just he's shot.
He was shot?
Yes, sniper.
He was shot by a sniper?
Yes. ISIS, Daesh.
Wounded?
Yes.
Where was he shot? Which part of his body?
Here.
He's pointing to his left shoulder, just below
yes,
it, near his heart.
Yes.
But now he's back on the battlefield.
Yes.
What's his name?
Ismail.
Ismail.
Yes.
So Ismail is a brave and, so far, lucky man.
Yes, he's a very lucky man.
That report from Hugh Sykes in Erbil. 3 months after South Sudan's sacked Vice President Riek Machar fled the country, it turns out he's been in South Africa. Mr Machar left South Sudan after fighting broke out between his troops and government forces back in July, shattering a peace deal which it had been hoped would bring 2 years of fighting in the world's youngest country to an end. Riek Machar told our Africa correspondent Karen Allen why he left.
No, I was not injured. I fled Juba because we were attacked, starting from the 8th of July at the Republican Palace, and then continuous 2 days of the 10th and the 11th. Our forces were pushed out. We had to withdraw, and this withdrawal took us nearly 40 days. We went through tropical forests. We had to cut our way through until we arrived at the Congo. They were chasing me. I was the first vice president of the government and of the republic. But then they used all the might they had, the ground forces, the air force using helicopter gunships, using a drone and 2 spy planes to locate wherever we went to. So it was an ordeal by itself.
Are you planning to go back?
Oh, sure, yes. That's where I live.
Are you returning to South Sudan to fight? Because after all, you're reported as calling for a return to civil war in South Sudan.
I have not called for resumption of the war. The war was started. We are only defending ourselves. We are only resisting, and even to protect ourselves and our population.
Given the history of the rivalry between yourself and President Salva Kiir, Have you not lost credibility? Is it not time to step aside and allow somebody else to do that?
Make a survey. You will find that I have not lost credibility. 1991, we called for the right of self-determination. In 2011, we achieved our independence. That is a credit which we as a movement enjoy. In 2013, when we called for reforms and the fight against corruption, we were attacked. 2015, we brought about that peace agreement, and that peace agreement should bring more reforms to the country and install a new system of governance. 2016, we have been attacked. If a court were to be held, we would be found innocent. Where do we lose credibility? As a movement or as me as a person?
Would you be prepared to make a grand gesture as you return to Juba?
This depends on the political movement I lead. It does not depend on me.
The international community is judging you because of the number of lives and the number of people who have been displaced from their homes.
I'm not responsible for that. I bear responsibility because I act. And I don't act alone. I act with people who want to defend themselves, people who want reforms in governance, people who want a new system of governance.
And you are still the man who can bring peace?
Oh yes, I am still the man who will bring peace.
Riek Machar speaking to Karen Allen. They're saying he's broken the internet. Well, not quite, but a humble tea seller in the Pakistani capital Islamabad has become an internet sensation across South Asia for his looks. A picture of him throwing a brief glance at a photographer went viral in both Pakistan and India, with users of social media, especially women, voicing their approval. More details from our South Asia editor, Charles Haviland.
When Jia Ali spotted Arshad Khan, a young tea seller, at a stall on a Sunday market, she had little idea how virally her snap would be shared. The clincher was a shot in which he stared at the camera before looking away, smiling. It was his piercing blue-green eyes that proved such a winner. In both Pakistan and India, the hashtag Chaiwala, meaning tea seller, has been trending at full pelt, with Pakistani women commenting that he was hotter than his tea, and Indians wishing he would spend some time on their side of the border. Pakistani TV stations soon managed to track down Arshad Khan, excitedly asking him if he knew how popular he had become on social media. Yes, I know, Arshad told one excitable reporter. He said from early morning people were now coming and sharing their pictures of him, which was all very well but a bit disruptive, for if he couldn't sell his tea, what would he take home? Most of the tweeting has been good-humoured at a time of worsening relations between Pakistan and India, although one Pakistani user likened him to a nuclear weapon who could be unleashed for surgical strikes on Indian girls. Social media users have photoshopped his face onto a variety of body images, including muscular bare torsos and Bollywood action heroes.
Our pulchritudinous South Asia editor, Charles Haviland. Now we move to China, where a branch of IKEA in Shanghai has put up a sign this week identifying what it says is an illegal blind dating group. It appears some older customers have been more interested in meeting potential new lovers than taking home flat-pack furniture. IKEA has now told them no food, no seating. We heard more from Heather Chen, who's with BBC Online in Singapore.
The sign from IKEA in Shanghai is basically singling out a group of matchmaking senior citizens who've been coming to the canteen and mingling and kind of overstaying their welcome and basically being a public nuisance.
We are talking about senior citizens here, aren't we?
Yeah, senior citizens, a group of them that have been actually known to be hanging around IKEA's canteen in Shanghai for years now.
And in what way are they a nuisance?
So there's been a lot of public complaints about them basically gathering in the canteen, talking very loudly, speaking, arguing and spitting as well, as part of an informal matchmaking service to socialize and basically meet new partners.
Spitting and shouting doesn't sound to me like a terribly successful matchmaking service.
No, it's not. I think things get quite heated. It's just the way, probably how things are conducted in a very casual setting.
And why IKEA? Why would they gather there?
Most of the people, they actually have IKEA membership. So they've been redeeming free coffee, free drinks as part of just being able to have somewhere to sit down and enjoy the services. And it's free, it's accessible. It's a good environment, basically, for them.
Do we know where they're going to go instead?
There have been some commentary from some of the people who've been actually kicked out of the canteens. So one man known as Mr. Tew, so he was quoted as saying that, they may look to fast food joints instead or other food outlets.
What sort of reaction has there been? Are people sympathetic?
Well, there's been really a lot of discussion on Chinese social media. There are people who have been quite sympathetic. One guy was saying that they actually are quite harmless and criticized it as being a very draconian move that was quite cruel. But many others we see online were also actually in supportive of IKEA, with one blogger saying that the behavior was actually quite intolerable. And another has said that, it's ugly behavior and people shouldn't romanticize the notion that it was actually because people were trying to look for life partners in the canteen.
Heather Chen. Finally, Australian researchers say milk from Tasmanian devils could be used to treat antibiotic-resistant superbugs. Scientists from the University of Sydney say the milk contains important proteins that appear to be able to kill infections such as MRSA. Our health reporter Michelle Roberts has been investigating.
The Tasmanian devil may be an endangered species, but it's not a defenceless one. These feisty furry animals are the world's largest carnivorous marsupial and have evolved a keen sense of smell, along with sharp teeth and claws to catch their prey. Another clue to their survival comes not from their adult diet, but from what they drink as babies in the pouch: milk. Australian scientists have been studying devil milk and have found it's packed with important proteins or peptides that can fight off hard-to-treat infections, including the hospital superbug MRSA. Elizabeth Murchison, a UK expert in Tasmanian devils, says the animals evolved this defence to help their vulnerable young grow stronger.
The pouch is a very dirty environment full of bacteria and fungi, and it's always been a bit mysterious about how marsupial babies protect from themselves in this dirty environment. And so understanding how marsupials protect themselves gives us the opportunity to perhaps discover some new antibiotic properties.
The University of Sydney researchers ultimately hope to find new treatments for humans. They've scanned the devil's genetic code to find and recreate the infection-fighting compounds. So far, they've found 6. Work's already begun testing other marsupials, including koalas, to see if these animals will reveal more.
Michelle Roberts reporting, and that's it from us for now. I'm off to look for a really small milking stool and a really cooperative Tasmanian devil. But all being well, I will be back with an updated version of the Global News podcast later. If you'd like to comment on this podcast or the topics covered in it, do please send us an email. The address is globalpodcast@bbc.co.uk. I'm Jackie Leonard, and until next time, goodbye.